all from the Renton School District, and they have been working with Sound Discipline for at least 2 years. And I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves, and then we have some questions for them, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask your questions. So, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Burien Nelson. I teach 4th grade at Campbell Hill.
I'm Deanne Wells. I'm the principal at Campbell Hill.
And I'm Tanita Borton. I'm the office manager at Campbell Hill, as well as the shift manager for one of the Mary's Place Family Center sites.
Timothy Keegan, 6th grade, Dimmitt Middle School.
So thank you for being here with us. I have some specific questions and then some general questions. And I kind of saw them a little bit ahead of time, but not really. So, so Deanne, you're the principal at Campbell Hill, and you are in year 2 of full implementation with Sound Discipline. What are some of the things that you learned through your process?
I think one of the most important things that we've learned, not just me, but that we've learned, is that it starts with us. So being aware of our own emotions and our own ability to be regulated, just that first step helps kids be regulated and understand their emotions. I think, and other adults that come into our building. I think another really important thing is the idea of common language and the ability to talk to each other about, and kids about, how do you feel, using feeling words, recognizing that behavior is communication about a problem that we don't see versus attaching labels and beliefs about kids or families because of an action. We're really trying to recognize in each other and call on each other to think more deeply about what is happening in front of us and what can we do to make it better in that moment and long term. There's 100 things I learned, but I think the foundation for this work is that it begins with us, and it begins with our belief that the way we show up and be our best selves every day, whether it's using language or being able to be honest with each other or self-regulate, that's really one of the most important pieces to this work.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely. That's why you're here.
And when she says us, it just makes me so proud and humbled that us does not just include classroom teachers. It includes office staff. It includes custodial staff. It includes everyone in our building as far as adults learning this practice and being on the same page so that we too can be part of that, the culture that we're trying to cultivate, and we can share in the common language, and we as a unit can support our students and our families.
I'm going to add on too, because I think someone from the outside who gets the privilege to come into your building feels that. The sense of it's not one teacher's student or one principal's situation to deal with. It is a community that wraps around the young people who are there. So thank you for adding that on. Timothy, this kind of work is a paradigm shift. And you've been at Dimmitt for a while and have some history there. Can you share with the audience some things that have been hard and some bright spots, sort of help us see both sides of your journey?
Well, I think the biggest bright spot has been that our administration has been really supportive. I think I've only been a teacher for 3 years. Feels like a lot longer, but what I know is that time and space and support are the 3 most critical things when you're implementing something that is involving a paradigm shift. And so having the support from your admin, having them preach and establish that it's a priority to implement this work, and then also having them help create the space to do the work, to learn about it before you start implementing, to create the space to try new things, and then also to create the space to reflect on that and then continue to refine your practices. That, I think, is the biggest blessing that I have felt in terms of us implementing this work. And I think in terms of just in my classroom working with kids, when you start to see kids taking those moments of pause and using the language that you've taught them, and not just with themselves, but with you, holding you accountable for your behavior and their peers, like that is the magic. And you don't see that with every kid. So that is one of the big challenges, but when you do see that, you know that it's possible, and so you keep trying with every single kid.
And I think this year, as the 6th grade team really embraced the idea of how do we make sound discipline work for our whole team, they really have been, one thing I've noticed is really reflective and trying things and problem solving, and it doesn't always go right the first time or the second time, but really engaging in what could make it better, what do we need, and what's our next baby step. And I think that's the whole sort of everybody in it to figure it out for kids.
Yep, and it's, I mean, you can try this stuff, sort of piecemeal strategies in your classroom or with kids that you know, but it really becomes more powerful when it spreads across every single place that they are interacting with human beings in a building. So, yeah.
And it's one of the cool things in Renton, because we have Campbell Hill and Lake Ridge and Bryn Mawr, our 3 elementary schools, and they feed into Demet Middle School. So those kids are having that experience as elementary students, and now the opportunity to continue and grow those skills and that sense of community and connection and common language as they grow up. Thank you. Okay, Brianna, what changes have you noticed since you've been teaching at Campbell Hill, and your challenges and celebrations?
Okay. Something I've noticed with one of the students is they're being able to self-regulate. They notice when they're starting to become flipped and need to take a break. They notice when other students are becoming flipped and they say, hey, I think maybe you should take a brain break, or, you know, you're starting to flip, maybe you should take some deep breaths. And so they're reminding each other, and they're able to realize when, they're starting to flip. Some of the challenges are that we're trying to obviously rebuild the brain, you know, and for some students it takes a long time. And so you're teaching these things every single day, and for some students you don't see changes until the next school year or a few months later, and that can be really challenging as a teacher, and for other students as well.
I had the privilege of seeing your class meeting, and I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how class meetings have impacted your community.
So we have class meetings throughout the week, and a social emotional skill that we teach students is problem solving. Being able to problem solve with each other without adult help. And we model that through videos. I know my mom and we created a video for my class of us doing an apology to each other, ways to apologize in an effective way. And that really hit home for my students to see that, oh, like, Miss Nelson makes mistakes too. Like, she has to practice apologizing, and that hits home for students, and they, find the confidence to try it themselves. So taking what they learn in class meetings and applying it inside and outside of the classroom is
So now we got some general questions, and you can all speak to them, whoever feels moved. One of the things that's important to sound discipline is that these tools that we offer for building resilience aren't just helpful for young people exposed to trauma. They're helpful for all students. Can you speak to your experience with that?
I'll go. These guys know I'm the talker. So. These are communication skills, right? My ability to stay regulated and be able to say, it bugs me when, or I don't like that, or I do like that, or I need this, or I don't want that. Those are communication skills. And when we can't communicate, then we get frustrated, and then behaviors can happen. And that's true no matter how old you are or what experiences you have had. So the kids in a classroom who are experiencing someone else not being able to communicate, they're experiencing that too. So if Brianna is having a hard time and I'm sitting next to Brianna, I'm wondering what's going to happen. Is she going to tip over the desk? Is she going to cry? Am I supposed to help her? Is the teacher going to help her? The teacher seems busy. So even though I might not have the same experience as Brianna, I'm experiencing the same thing as Brianna when I'm with her in class. So our kids are learning to build community with each other, all of us, regardless of this certain experience or that certain experience. We're creating situations, for instance, in class meeting, where kids are able to say, I had a problem on the playground and I want help solving that problem, and kids go around the circle and give those suggestions. So it doesn't matter whether I'm the one with the problem or I'm the one giving the suggestion. I'm part of the community. And we really try to make sure kids understand that they count or belong every day, everywhere they go. And that we have to have all of us doing this together. We need you, we need your voice, so and so. So I think that's the piece that helps us move this forward as an everybody thing, because it's a human thing. It's not an ACEs thing, it's a human.
I will add on. I concur with all of that. And as a sixth grade teacher, which is a major year of transition for kids, where they're going from, for the most part being in one environment all day to different environments 6 times throughout the day, 6 different transitions, 6 different expectations from 6 different people, plus anybody that they're seeing in the hallway. This is a really amazing way for them to feel control and power over themselves, which is super critical at the age that they're at as well, when they're starting to, branch out from what their parents might think, start being more experimental with a variety of things, right? Just behavior, people, all of this stuff. I think it's an amazing way for them to really just check in with themselves and realize, I do have power despite the fact that things feel really crazy.
Thank you. Hey, Tanita, I skipped your question. Did you notice? So you have a really important role at Campbell Hill as being an office man and sort of having a pulse on the school and seeing everybody. What are some things that you've noticed from your perspective? Sorry.
What have I noticed? Again, I've noticed a shift in the culture in our building, where we're holding each other, I think, accountable, and we're doing everything we can, and we will continue to do more to bring families on board with this process.
Yeah, tell them what you're going to do.
Yes, I am going to
do a commercial.
Yes, I'm actually going to be doing the parenting training piece, and in conjunction with the work that I do at Campbell Hill, but there's no way that I could ignore this opportunity and bring this to the forefront of the work that I do with the families that are experiencing homelessness at Mary's Place. So it's my passion project for Mary's Place, and it's just my passion period with Campbell Hill. So.
All right. So from your perspective, if you were in the audience from a school or a district and you were thinking about embarking on this work, suggestions, advice, baby steps, what would you suggest?
Reach out to Sound Discipline.
Hey, thanks.
I'd also add that I think it is a paradigm shift just culturally for a lot of people, and so if you think you're ready to take on this work, just be prepared for a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of wait, but this is not how I would, because it's very different from the way most people in this room have been raised. And it's challenging, but it is incredibly rewarding and does make things easier as you do the work more frequently.
Even when it doesn't work, you're doing the better thing than screaming, yelling, shouting, suspending, kicking out, ignoring, flipping your lid, punishing, blaming, shaming. But it's better than that. So that it didn't work on this day doesn't mean that it won't work later. It doesn't mean that it wasn't the right thing to do. We talk a lot about helpful, not hurtful. And I spend all day making sure that I'm being as helpful as I can be. So even when it's hard, and even when it doesn't work, I'm still thinking about being helpful and not hurtful. And I truly believe my staff is doing the same thing. And we're challenged every day, and we remind ourselves of that every day. So I think the work starts with being here, seeing the movie, understanding there's a different way, thinking about ACEs for yourself. What does that mean for how I show up in any situation? Could mean nothing, could mean a lot. Dr. Nadine Burke wrote a wonderful book called The Deepest Well. Read the book or listen to the book. It just takes her work to this whole other level around what does it mean to be a community that responds. She has a TED Talk that I have not watched that I heard is also great. So I just feel like it's going to start with you because you make an effort to learn something about yourself and your next step. And then you make relationships in your classroom or at your church or in your community or in your family, and you do it just a little bit differently because you know something different. So when you know better, you do better. That's just true.
Right. So we want to give space for your questions. Anybody?
I'm just curious how it came to be that you were able to implement the 2-year program at your school. How did that happen?
Well, there's a long story. The short version is, in Renton School District, a sister school of ours, was a turnaround school. So bottom 5%, better do something, better do it quick. That school focused on academics for the first year or so. And partway through that year, the principal saw a talk by Jody and said, oh, this is the missing piece. She went back to a staff that was working very hard on academics and said, I know I said I wouldn't give you one more thing, but can I tell you about this? And her question was, do you think what we're doing now will make the difference for our kids? If we only did this, will it make the difference for our kids? And they said, no. So then she presented the information. All but one person on the staff said, ooh, I'm tired, but yes, we'll take it on. So that school had quite a lot of success by implementing lots of things in lots of ways. And then we started what was at that time called the West Hill Now project or initiative. So my school, Campbell Hill, is on the West Hill. Dimmitt is on the West Hill. So we became part of this initiative. That initiative is funded through many channels, one of them being the district. And it's a priority of the district to make sure that they're making a difference on the West Hill and Renton, the Skyway area. So that's how we got into the work. I was the assistant principal at Lake Ridge that implemented the work there. So now I'm the principal at Campbell. So that work is part of all of our schools on the West Hill. And it, where we know that it's going to take something more than just academics. So the district backs us up with that.
I'm curious about networking with anybody from Seattle Public Schools District.
So we are actually working in several Seattle Public Schools, and we will come to any school that wants us. And we start with just talking about resilience and basic tools for creating connection and creating firmness.
born when they're hyper-aroused, generally angry. But like the film recognized, some kids become withdrawn, shut down. So I'm curious if you have methods within the program to help kids become aware, and kids become aware of each other when they withdraw and shut down.
So, flipped lid we often think of as angry and big, and it isn't always looked like that, right? So having that awareness of what does it look like or feel like in my body, we invite young people to become a scientist in your body. So that's a piece of helping them understand that. Interesting that you would say, what's another tool? Jody mentioned that Dr. Dan Siegel was at Campbell Hill yesterday, and he was part of a student panel discussion, and he moved right into teaching, which was lovely to watch. And he spoke about his wheel of aware, and we're going to create off of that, which is a deeper way besides just sort of I'm regulated, I'm kind of here, or I'm flipped. I can go from my hub, and there's all these options around my different feelings and my different actions. And so we're going to take that work and turn it into, so Discipline's going to work on turning it into a something in the next couple weeks so that we can try it out. And then he's actually, some way, well actually that's with drawing. So his model is involving kids in drawing where they see the things and sort of helping them use that to help regulate and build their awareness, because he talked about the space between my reaction and my awareness, that space in between being really important. So we're going to work on that, and then he actually offered to come and do a Skype visit with the kids after they do some work with that. So we'll let you know.
Okay.
It's up and coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I work in the Highline School District, and we've had just a smattering of this training. And I'm just curious now that how you might talk about the connection maybe between this and ruler. Do you guys use that as your language? Like, what is there a connection?
So we work in many schools that use Ruler. Ruler is a program that really helps young people learn about regulating and their awareness of their emotions, so it blends nicely. We have other pieces that we build on, so it's not in conflict with Ruler at all. It's a nice additional piece. So when we're doing the mood meter and having that awareness of where I am in my body and in my thinking, that's helpful. And then we build on other social emotional skills around that. Another piece that's similar in Ruler, the charter in Ruler is similar to making agreements, building community in the classroom. So it dovetails really nicely.
In classrooms where you have kids who are having really different experiences with you, some kids who are getting it and learning to self-regulate, and other kids who, as you said, just you don't feel like you're reaching. What do you do if you get kids sort of saying, oh, well, that kid just doesn't, is bad. The kids can label each other, you're a bad kid, I'm a good kid, because I can calm myself down. So how do you, as you're dealing with kids who are difficult to reach, how do you assure them that they're on their journey and don't get discouraged?
Well, those are conversations you have in class meetings, right? Like, students are aware, of different behavior shown in class, but something you really have to talk to with students constantly is we're all on different paths. We're all working on something different. And we have to be patient with each other, and we actually have to help each other out in that process. So when our classmate is super upset and is, not in their best of mood, there are things that we can do to help them. Maybe turning away or staying calm ourselves. So we talk about that openly as a class, that we're all working on something different. And sometimes it takes longer than others to get to that path.
The students really learn to be helpful, not hurtful.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
quite remarkable.
Yes.
It shifts their frame. They are no longer under threat.
Yep.
And so it really brings compassion out of them. It takes time, but within a year, kids really begin to see each other.
Hold that creates a community that's safe.
And those things still happen. I feel like
Oh yeah.
those responses were delightful, but they also the people still say mean things, right? Like, and it's always an opportunity to help them learn to a different behavior, right? To carve a neural pathway, as the scientists like to say. And it is hard, and we're in a different stage at Dimmitt than these folks are, and a lot of the sound discipline curriculum has been very elementary focused. So we're pioneering a lot of work in terms of how does this fit in a middle school where they are transitioning, and because we're not sorry, I'm pregnant and I'm totally having pregnancy brain problems. But we have exclusion, right? We have some discovery programs, we have special ed kids. So there's kids in and out of classes, and they're not the same classes. You don't have the same kids, and so establishing a class meeting within a middle school structure is really challenging. I'm still struggling with the issue that you're talking about, but the more that I can just ground myself in, this is an opportunity for me to teach and for me to pose a question to them so that they feel empowered to explore what a possible solution is. That's getting us toward them being prepared for class meetings when we figure out whatever that structure is, and that I think will help to anchor even more of those kids.
Thank you.
Do you talk with kids at all about their ACEs? Like, is that transparent at all, or is that between the adults?
It's actually not part of what we think our role is, so it doesn't really matter your ACEs necessarily. It matters how you show up and how we can build your skills. So it's not like we're saying what's your ACE score, even trying to pay attention to that. We're noticing what the behaviors are, and based on what we see as what's happening, how can we support you, what are the lagging skills, and how can we build those skills, recognizing that many of the young people who are at these schools are dealing with adverse experiences, but it's not about naming that.
So when you're, as the adults, like when you're looking at your MTSS or whatever, you just acknowledge they're probably affected, so we can just go from there. We don't need to.
I would offer that we don't try to label that.
Yeah.
What we're trying to think about is what is the student's strengths, so that we have something to build off of. So this kid's really good at expressing emotion. Sometimes that's the strength. And then we think about what's the missing skill that's showing up the most often. And how do we use that student's ability to be passionate and expressive to help fill in that space or that skill? I don't think any of us have the need to say, this must be happening to you. I feel like that gets into all kinds of mess that I'm not qualified to do. What I am qualified to do is help us recognize kids' strengths and take an action to help build students' skills. It is not my job or my place to name or count ACEs or put a label on a family or a kid. So
I think we are aware, though, right? Like, we know our kids, and we know their stories,
Some
right?
of them,
And
some of
various
them.
other staff within the building. I'm a teacher, so that's the perspective I speak from. But other support staff in the building, we overlay and help support in those areas that those students might need. But this is just another tool for them that's part of their overall intervention program.
We're just paying attention to time, so I think I saw 3 hands.
How are you communicating with the parents about the tools that you're using with the children? Are you sending paperwork at home, or are you holding sessions with the parents?
There are parenting sessions offered throughout the community, and we do send home information about that. It is part of our handbook and part of what we talk about this is what we do at Campbell Hill. As a principal and an assistant principal, I take every opportunity that I get with parents to talk about brain science and the idea of not being mad at a student for their behavior. I usually start my conversation about how we fixed it. The fix could be you need to be home for a day while we come up with a plan. That's true. That could be one of the things that we talk about. But I'm pretty upfront with parents and open with parents about this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. The teachers are doing the same thing. It's part of their newsletter. They're saying what skills they're working on. We're talking about class meetings. We're talking about compliments. So we're real transparent in sort of both a general way and then specifically as things occur and within classrooms.
And I'm going to add on just a little piece to that, which is that Sound Discipline, we know that if we're going to create buffering adults, it's critical that we bring parents in. So one of our focuses next year is going to be having more ongoing parenting workshops. If anybody wants to come, May 17th at Creston Point Apartments at 7 o'clock. There's going to be a 2-hour parenting talk intro. So we're beginning that work, and we're going to be much more intentional with having that in multiple locations next year, hopefully. So.
And people from the community, we'll train people from the community to teach it. It doesn't have to be us.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was those. Yeah. Yeah. And
Me?
yeah.
Okay. I was just curious about the Miss Kendra curriculum, and because I just saw a snapshot of it. But when kids are writing letters about things like, "Oh, my dad's in prison," like, what kind of responses do they get back?
I don't know about what I know about Ms.
Okay.
Kendra's letters is what I see here.
Okay.
So and what I've read a little bit online, so I don't think I can speak fairly to
Okay.
that.
Is that something that
So we
she
do
does?
not.
We don't
Yeah.
do we don't
That's
do that.
just her class.
Yeah, that's just that's
a different
yeah,
animal.
that's a
Oh,
different
okay.
something else. Yeah, we don't do that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering how much mental health therapy is available to the kids with high ACEs scores?
Not enough.
Amen.
And what's being done to increase that and make it more accessible?
Well,
Anything?
you know, it's one of the things that we talk about, and when I think about Dr. Burkeritz, and she sort of talks about the different lanes in her lane, the medical lane about naming ACEs, identifying ACEs, knowing that and supporting the family in that, and the teacher lane is to build the skills and have the awareness, and the mental health piece, how do we bring that in the middle of this so that it's part of one of those spokes. And so we talk about how do we get more access, how do we make it easier, how do we remove barriers. Great question. We gotta let mom have questions.
You mentioned you've got a captive audience of adults to speak to at Mary's Place. And I teach with Seattle Public Schools, and I know a lot of times the parents that we most are really wanting to get a hold of aren't the ones that show up. And how would you get a captive audience at Campbell Hill or Dimmitt? You mentioned about these community meetings in different places, and I think that's a great idea, but how would you do that in your own schools?
Start by feeding them.
Right?
Yes.
Right? If you feed them, they will come.
Food and childcare.
And childcare.
And
absolutely.
interpreters.
And interpreters, yes.
And my experience, I've been doing this for many, many years, but our experience was exactly that when I first was teaching in Snohomish, that the people who the school wanted weren't the first parents that came, but within a year and a half, the word of mouth was, they make me feel respected. And that's what brought people. So it just takes time. People, why would they trust us to begin with? It just has to build trust. So you do it over and over and over again, and then the people who've had some success share it with their friends, and they share it with their friends, and that's how we build the community, slowly. And it's powerful.
We recently had an event at Campbell Hill where we had nearly 50 community members come up. And they took time off in the middle of the day to come and be with our kids and talk with our kids and share their stories and listen to our kids' stories. And what I made sure I said to my staff was, we cannot continue to believe that our community will not come. They do come. There's something about the way we're inviting them that hasn't worked yet. Because I watched 50 people walk in my door. I don't even know where they all parked.
Right, yeah.
Like literally. And they were there, and they were there in the middle of the day, and they were there for 2 hours. They took off their job to come be with us because we asked them to. So it's really important that we're asking the right questions and in the right way. lots of things about the way we traditionally do PTA or family engagement and those kinds of things are missing folks that want to be involved. So we work on that all the time. How are we inviting? How are we building trust? How are we communicating in a way that people can hear us or we can hear them versus being talked at? And I just, it was so clear in this event. I mean, these guys were there. Ebony was there. They came. So we're going to build on that. We're going to remember and tell each other all the time. Our parents, our community wants to be part of this. That we have to stop saying that they don't at our school. We saw evidence that they do. So that's a paradigm shift. That we have to stop saying that out loud to ourselves and believing that about our families at our school for sure.
I think we also have to stop demanding that they come to school for everything. I mean, we saw in the video they were making home visits.
Yes.
Like, it can't always be about everybody coming into the school building, especially.
You did that. You speak to spring conferences, what you guys?
We didn't go to homes. I would have loved that.
Right.
No, students are doing their own conferences at home with their families. But I think, we get strapped for time. We get bound by contracts with our unions, which I'm totally a union person.
Right.
But there are some challenges to getting out. Going into other people's spaces is not comfortable. Language barriers, like there's all of these things. But if we're expecting them, like families, to give up everything and come to us, we've got to be willing to do the same thing with them. And I think that is bringing school outside of the school building is what needs to happen.
One more question. Quick question, please. Well, I don't know. I'll try to make it quick. What kind of data improvement have you seen? What's your data showing?
Our discipline data, in many months, we have cut referral data, so discipline data, if you will, in half. In really what I would consider 1 year of really everybody on board doing the same thing. I think more importantly, the anecdotal data, when you walk in our building, it's calm. Adults aren't yelling, kids aren't yelling. I'm not saying no one ever yells. Right? I'm not saying kids don't freak out. I'm not saying parents don't freak out. But I'm saying in general, when you walk in my building, it's a calm place to be. It's more calm than it was a year ago. Perfection is not expected nor required. We're working hard. But there's something about that that's very powerful. When we were meeting with Dan Siegel, we had all the kids sitting around this table, and there was a pause, and I was like, you couldn't hear it. Like, there was no sounds. I was like, wow, it's quiet here. We never say the Q word out loud at school, so I didn't say that. I just thought that. But that's a huge difference right now for us. At spring, 1 year later, it's a big deal.
Thank you. So I just want to pause and appreciate. Next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. These folks are making amazing things happen. We have a little present for them. This is a thank you. And I want to sort of pull it full circle and invite you to share what you've learned. We have this video. We can come to you and show it. Next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. If you want to share appreciation and for your teacher and also for Sound Discipline, you can go to our website and we will send a card to your teacher with a donation to Sound Discipline. How's that for bribery? It's also Give Big next week, which is our big community thing, and we hope that you think about what the work we're doing. Share it with your friends, share it with your neighbors, because we are a nonprofit. We do charge schools, but it doesn't cover the full cost. So we really rely on the whole community to help us make a difference for these children and these adults in school so that we can all have a better community. And mostly I want to thank you for coming out on a beautiful evening and taking
taking time to learn something new and hopefully bring something back to where you are. So thank you so much for coming. Yeah.
I just, like, having watched this and knowing that, like, some schools don't have funding, the crisis clinic, got a grant through the city of Seattle, and they are giving, free 2-hour trainings to schools on trauma-informed care. So that's available to schools if you wanna reach out to the crisis clinic. This is a free resource for those that maybe can't afford.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And there's a handout on resources for trauma with a bunch of books and links that you can go. Our newsletter, again, only comes out twice a month. It has some hints every time on how to help each other be a community. Please, take resources. And then if you would take a moment, everybody had a little thing on their seat. If you take a moment to fill one out for us so that we can know how to make this better for the community, it would really be appreciated. You can just leave them on the counter in the back. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
We have not met before, but when I heard your name, I've got in person on my email friends.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Many years.
So I was the director after one.
Okay.
So I think maybe I was walking down the street with Sasha.
Okay. Yeah.
So when we get that coffee, put your name on that. You put your name on that and give them your.